Do you need a break?
You read my mind.
Come with me.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of my weekly show, The Break. I'm Father Roderick, I'm a priest and I'm a geek, and I love to share with you the deeper layers of the stories that we enjoy so much, and to dive into all these wonderful TV shows, video games, and books that we all enjoy, and hopefully you'll get some ideas for your next break. And this episode of The Break is brought to you thanks to my patrons, those people that support me with their community and their feedback, and also with their monthly donation. There is also, for you, a way to join that community, even if you're not ready to support me financially. But I would really want to invite you to join that community. So go to patreon.com/Father Roderick. You can sign up for free. And in return, as a thank you, I will send you the stories that I write almost every day about movies, about Star Wars, about The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, you name it, anime. And I always try to talk about something that I've just seen or played or read, and then I try to take some life lessons from that. So it's a very personal type of article that I'm writing, and I love to share it with, but only join the community if that's the kind of stuff that you enjoy, because I don't want to spam you with stuff that you don't care for. So just take a look, patreon.com/Father Roderick. Take a look around there, see what kind of stories you can expect, and I hope you join. And one last thing, we're also working on opening up a part of our Discord server, which so far for the past 2 years has been completely closed to the outside world. It was only accessible for my paying Patreon supporters. But likewise, just as we opened the Patreon community to basically anyone who is interested in what I do, we also want to open part of the Discord server so we can invite you to join the conversation there as well. And I know that many of you already use Discord for a lot of different servers that that you are enjoying, and different communities that you are a part of. And I really would like you to be part of my community on Discord as well. But stay tuned. There's still a ton of stuff that we're working on at the beginning of this new year. And so we're rolling this out very gradually, but the stories are already there on my Patreon site. So don't hesitate to take a look and to become a member.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Oh my goodness, it's not just a long time ago, but that galaxy far, far away is happening right now, this week, and I couldn't be more excited about the news that just broke. You may have already heard about it on your social media feeds or anywhere else. We are getting another Star Wars movie. Yes, I know. It's insane. We already have the promise of 3 major Star Wars movies that are currently in production, all 3 of them. But in addition to those 3 that were announced last year at the Star Wars celebration in London, I remember how excited I was when I heard about that. We're getting a 4th Star Wars movie, and it is very likely that that will be the one that will bring us back to the theaters for a genuine theatrical Star Wars experience. And oh my goodness, I've been missing those Star Wars premieres. COVID was a disaster worldwide for so many millions of people. But it was also a small disaster for Star Wars fans, because one of the things that makes Star Wars is that theatrical experience, is to be surrounded by hundreds of fellow Star Wars fans and to see that opening scroll on the big screen. Now, of course, we did get amazing television shows, and I don't think that Star Wars would be where it is today if it hadn't been for that incredible explosion of creativity on the small screen. But unfortunately, that also had a side effect, and that is that we didn't get any movies anymore, because nobody at the time was daring to invest in the production of theatrical releases, because we didn't know what the future would look like. But now that we have things more or less under control, there is a new opportunity for Lucasfilm, for Disney, for the Star Wars creators to make movies. And so What is this new movie that has just been announced? And it came out of the blue. I was like, this is the best surprise and the best gift that a Star Wars fan can get at the beginning of the year. It's like a belated Christmas gift almost. It is going to be a story about the two biggest Star Wars heroes of the modern Star Wars era. I'm talking about The Mandalorian, and I'm talking about our beloved Star Wars baby, Grogu. The movie is going to be about the Mandalorian and Grogu, and that, in fact, is now used as the title of that fourth Star Wars movie. This is the weirdest Star Wars title that I've ever heard. It's also the most kind of obvious one. Like, the movie is called The Mandalorian and Grogu, but it would almost be as if the first installment of the original trilogy was not called A New Hope, but instead Luke, Leia, and Han. Or if you look at the way the story is told from the perspective of the two droids, it would be C-3PO, R2-D2, and some humans. I mean, it's a very literal title. And we're so used to hear titles that evoke something that are a bit mysterious. The only one that gets close to this is the movie Solo, where it's Solo. It's about Han Solo. It's pretty basic. And now we get The Mandalorian and Grogu. Somewhere, I was hoping for a little bit more imagination in the title. On the other hand, I'm thinking this is probably, from a marketing perspective, a very smart thing to do. Because most casual Star Wars fans that may have seen an episode or two of the television series, may have seen the merchandise, they are familiar with Grogu, or Baby Yoda, as I think most people in the world still call him. And obviously, if you have seen Grogu, you will have seen The Mandalorian, the helmet, the whole branding. So to use those two names to pitch a movie, it guarantees that the audience knows that this is about something that they can enjoy, even if they're not hardcore Star Wars fans. So I expect this movie to try to find the broadest audience possible. I don't expect this movie to be controversial in any possible way. I think that Disney, and this may also be one of the reasons that they're adding this fourth Star Wars movie to the roster, because they know that at least part of the Star Wars fandom is extremely critical, seems to be very unhappy about where Star Wars is going right now. So what they know they have to do from a marketing perspective is to make sure that, at least for the foreseeable future, Star Wars again will be a story of the masses, a story that everybody loves, that kids can go see because it's got Baby Yoda and what parents can see with their children. So I'm thinking this is going to be a classic Star Wars story that will be very much a feel-good story, full of nostalgia, and also with the kind of newer style of storytelling that we are now familiar with thanks to the TV series. I think this is a super smart move. It surprises me that they're only coming up with it now. I would have expected this to have been announced last year. But it shows how much Disney is still tweaking its strategy when it comes to Star Wars. And I'm sure that behind the scenes, a lot of similar processes are happening right now around their Marvel property, which is also in dire straits, at least from the outside perspective. And so I'm sure that they are also racking their brains, like, how can we bring back what people used to love so much about our Marvel stories? Because that's where a lot of the money is. And I think with Star Wars, this is a clear sign that they realize that they need to recapture the hearts of every Star Wars fan in the world, even the casual ones, even the critical ones. Because who can be mad about Grogu? Who can be bitter and resentful when you see Baby Yoda? You just melt. You have to be so much into the dark side not to like the premise of this movie. So I think this is part of not just a marketing strategy, but I think this is for them very important to the overall recalibration of what Star Wars is in the mind of the masses. And why not choose the most successful Star Wars character ever created, which is, I have to say it's Grogu. I can't imagine any other character, maybe Darth Vader, but Darth Vader, it's a dark side character. So not everybody's like, people are like, everybody knows Darth Vader, but to say I'm a massive fan of Darth Vader, for a lot of people, But Baby Yoda, Grogu, oh my goodness, how can you look into those big eyes and not melt? So it's like a Trojan horse to a certain extent. It's like they bring in this Baby Yoda to eliminate the threat of the let's say the hyper negativity around Star Wars, and I think this is going to be very successful. Now, the movie apparently will be directed by Jon Favreau, who, of course, was the one who came up with this whole concept of Baby Yoda. He's been creating The Mandalorian, as well as a couple of other Star Wars television series together with Dave Filoni. But Dave Filoni has his own movie. So now, both showrunners, you could say, although Disney so far hasn't used that term, I think, for the both of them, but both these creators of The Mandalorian, and I think the most influential voices right now when it comes to what Star Wars is and what Star Wars will become will each have their own movie. And Jon Favreau, of course, I'm not telling you anything new, is an incredible director and also an incredible writer, someone who really knows how to reach the heart, the feelings of the people that watch his movies. I'm a massive fan of what Jon Favreau has done. All his movies are amazing, and what he's done for Star Wars, it's just insane. To a certain extent, I even think that he is better able to reach my heart as a Star Wars fan than George Lucas was. George was a visionary. He was a storyteller, but he wasn't very good at on the emotional level. And I think that Favreau has, even more than Dave Filoni, who is more akin, I think, to George Lucas in terms of his style of storytelling. But I think that Favreau is instrumental when it comes to making Star Wars feel, makes me feel something as a Star Wars fan. And that's I think, just part of who he is and part of the way in which he tells stories. And so I expect this movie to be a massive success for Disney. I guarantee you this movie is going to be a box office hit. Now, in addition to that, we have some related news that also made me super happy, namely in the press release for this upcoming fourth movie about The Mandalorian and Grogu, there was also an aside, and that it confirmed that, yes, Ahsoka Season 2 is now in production, which is something that, of course, I was hoping for. I kind of expected it. But I think it's also because they seem to have changed a little bit the order of release of these movies. And since we first get a movie about The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is very smart because a lot of the teams are already working on the next Mandalorian season. So you have already all that experience and talent, and the actors and the puppeteers and the special effects people, they're ready. The only thing they need to do is to upscale it, to give it more budget and maybe more time and more resources. But what they've been doing, it's basically doing that for a theatrical audience. So I think it's very smart. It's probably also a very cost-effective way to bring us that first movie. But it means that the Dave Filoni movie that was going to be about the Mandoverse, it was going to be about how all these different stories in Ahsoka, The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett would all come together in this, in this culmination on the big screen. Because that movie is probably going to be pushed back a little bit, we, I think, do get more room for Season 2 of Ahsoka. That's my theory. And then, of course, we've got two other movies that are very intriguing, and that's the one about the origins of the Force. So it's like Star Wars prehistory. So we go back to the Jurassic age of the Force. That is still very vague. We don't know anything about it. That is going to be a world without Jedi. So from a marketing perspective, that's more of a risky step to take. And then, of course, we get this movie with Rey as the central figure. She will try to rebuild the Jedi Order, or at least rebuild a Jedi school. And that story apparently is also already very far in development. They felt confident enough that they could, talk about it in the press last week. So we had that press release, or the interview with the female director of the movie about Rey. Super excited. And then right on the heels of that, a few days later, we get this surprise announcement of this fourth movie. Star Wars is looking good, I have to say. It's making me so happy that I am experiencing this. This is a golden age for Star Wars fans like me, and also makes me want to go back and rewatch some of the Star Wars movies. And the other day I was reading about Rogue One, and since we now know that Andor will be pushed to 2025, I was like, I need to go and rewatch Rogue One. It's been several years since I last watched that movie, and it's so good. I may go back and, I don't know. Let me know if you want me to talk more about those existing movies and TV shows. Maybe I can come up with some like a video series or something like that. Just let me know what you'd be interested in.
The most beloved fantasy story of all time. It is the tale of a small hobbit and the great wizard who appeared to him one day.
All right, dude, check it out. Go like that way, and then up this one mountain, and then kill all the hippies you come across.
No, I'm searching for a dragon's treasure.
I'm the wizard, you're the dwarf, and you will respect my authority.
I am no dwarf.
Last week I told you that I started playing The Mines of Moria, which is the only game that I know of that takes place in the fourth era of Middle-earth, which in itself is a fascinating glimpse of what could have been. We all know that Tolkien was thinking about writing a sequel to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He never realized it. He did start writing, and then he gave up on it. And he didn't feel good about it, and it never materialized. I think there might still be, some written stuff, some notes, maybe somewhere in the archives of the Tolkien estate. Maybe it has been published. I'm not that much of a scholar to know for sure. But we do know that there are some glimpses of what this fourth era, so it's the time period after the events of The Lord of the Rings, what that looked like in the appendices that Tolkien wrote. And this is also what makes it possible for these game developers to use that particular era and what we know about what Tolkien wanted to do during that era, to use that as the basis of their game. Because as you are familiar with, the Tolkien estate is very protective of what people can do with Tolkien's works. And since he sold the rights to the Lord of the Rings story and to the Hobbit, and the Tolkien estate has very little influence on that. The appendices are explored to the most intricate details by the makers of this game, and also for the Rings of Power series. A lot of the stuff that we see in the Rings of Power is based on the appendices, so it's not based on the Silmarillion, as many people think it is, but they can't, because the Tolkien estate is unwilling to release the... or to grant people to use that story. They're super protective of it, which I can understand. And I'm very glad that we have those appendices, because it forms a very fertile base, even though it was just written as an appendix, as an appendix. So it's something that Tolkien just wrote probably to placate the readers of his trilogy, but it was never meant to be more important than The Lord of the Rings. And now it is used as the basis for so many other, new stories to tell in Middle-earth that are based on canon events. Just like we get to see a new Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie. Let's not forget about that one, The War of the Rohirrim. So Rohan, of course, was such a fundamental part of the story of the Lord of the Rings, and especially of the movies. The second movie is very much about the battle at Helm's Deep and the Rohan culture, and so this whole this whole movie is going to be based on that particular part of what Tolkien wrote in The Lord of the Rings about the Rohirrim. So I don't know how they're going to tell this story, but I have no doubt that Peter Jackson knows what he's doing. He is a massive fan, and also the Philippa Boyens and the other people that work with him. They are not official Tolkien scholars, but they have a vast knowledge of Tolkien's world. So I'm also extremely curious about what they did with that particular story. So being able to walk through the Mines of Moria almost on a daily basis. I usually do this before I go to bed. I like to hang out in the Mines of Moria with Michiel, with Inge, and we walk around and we kill some orcs and find some resources, and we make our way through the mines. It's a lot of fun. And the only downside of that game is that it's all underground. So it does get a little bit oppressive. It's a good thing that I play this in the evening when it's dark outside. It's the winter right now. So it feels appropriate to be in the dark all the time. But in order to compensate for this kind of dark experience, gaming-wise, I've also started to play, and I'm just setting my first steps in a world that is very similar to the world of Middle-earth. It's based on what we know of the medieval culture, and the game is called Medieval Dynasty. And it's apparently a video game in a series of games where you have to build a dynasty. So you have to build a town, start a family, and make sure that your legacy continues through the Middle Ages. In this case, it's Middle Ages. And what I love about this game is it looks as good as Skyrim, if you have ever played that. It's very immersive. It's the same kind of first-person perspective, so it really feels like you're walking around there. It's beautifully rendered. When I walk around through the woods and I see a river in the distance, it feels like I'm in Middle-earth. It doesn't have the fantasy aspect, but it does have that same vibe of like back to nature. This is, there's no technology there. And it's a lot of fun to discover the mechanics of the game almost just by playing it. You don't have to learn a lot of rules. You just want to chop a tree, and then you realize, well, wait a minute, I can only carry one tree at a time because these things are heavy. And so it's very realistic. You also get hungry. When it snows, you get cold, so you have to. It's also partially a survival game. It just makes me feel like I live in Middle Earth. It's strange. It doesn't have a fantasy component, and yet it's the most Middle Earth type experience that I've ever had, thanks to this game. So it's a lot of fun. I'm waiting for the moment that I can play games like these in 3D, in virtual reality. The technology is not there yet. Even the Quest 3 with its upgraded chip, they can do very immersive games, but it still looks like a video game. I mean, the quality of the graphics is a bit like a PlayStation 3. That's the best you can get. So it will probably take 3-4 years, is my guess, until we get the kind of realism that is needed to make you actually forget that you're in a fake world. And that's where I think this VR technology is going very quickly. I'll talk a little bit more about some new things that we learned about the upcoming Apple Vision Pro in the premium segment of this show. And it's very easy to get access to the premium version by becoming the lowest tier member of my Patreon community. So all my paying patrons are getting access to a premium show every single week. And it's more of what you like to listen to here. It's just, I have some more room to talk about stuff that is that I'm passionate about. All right, let's talk about Harry Potter. That's another fantasy franchise that is currently again in development. We all know that Warner wants to milk their franchise, make money with Harry Potter, and from what I've heard, they still don't know exactly what they want. They have committed themselves to a 8-season television series based on the books. It's going to be much closer to the books than the movies were. But they are still not sure if they want to recast the actors, if they want to, make it real life, and somewhere I'm hoping that they're going for that, if they are going to turn this into an animated television series. I think that would be, for me as a Harry Potter fan, the smartest thing, because then they avoid blowing up basically what the franchise has established over the past 15 years. We are so much associating the Harry Potter brand with how it was visualized in the movies. I mean, you think of Harry Potter, you think of Daniel Radcliffe, you think of Hermione, you think of Ron, you think of Hagrid. You see the faces of the actors, and recasting them, I think will throw all that away. Not to mention all the merchandise that is based on the movies, the Lego sets, all that will be erased if they recast and change the overall looks of the magical world. They can avoid all that by going animation. I don't know. I'm worried, and at the same time, I'm also excited because the books have so much more stuff that is cool and that is interesting and charming that I want to see. And just the other day, I was comparing the movie to the first chapters of the first Harry Potter book, the Philosopher's Stone. And I noticed that the book I'd totally forgotten about that because it's been 20 years since I've read that book. It starts in a totally different way. It starts with the Dursleys, and it's the father who goes to work, and then he hears all these strange Muggle rumors, and he sees people walking around in wizard robes in the streets of London, and he's like, what is going on? And then it turns out that it's all because the wizards are finally daring to show themselves in public because you know who is no longer there. The Voldemort's effort to kill Harry Potter has failed. The boy now lives. And that is such a victory. That's such proof that Voldemort is not invincible that they dare to come out. I think that's an amazing part of the story. It's completely left out of the movie because, of course, you can only do so much in a 2-hour movie. So I am excited about this idea of expanding the story and integrating all the other stuff that's in the books, and I think that would work really well, provided, of course, that the screenplay is well written. And that's also where my fear is, because if J.K. Rowling is involved and she is very hands-on, we've seen this when they started to develop the Fantastic Beasts series. I'm not entirely certain that is going to be good for the series, that it's going to be good for the franchise. First of all, because she has proven time and again that she's not very good at screenwriting. Those Fantastic Beasts stories were very flawed. I hated the last movie. I still am not over that. How can they mess up the franchise like that? But also the other Fantastic Beasts movies were kind of mediocre. So I don't think that she is good at this. And the second thing, of course, is that J.K. Rowling is surrounded by controversy. And so the more she is involved in this new incarnation of her stories, the more that controversy will reflect upon the franchise as such. So I'm hoping that they keep her at a distance, and that they will do what actually they did very well with Star Wars. Just bring in new storytellers. Just ideally, I would say, just let J.K. Rowling sell her franchise. She's never going to do that as long as she lives. But that would be so much better for the Harry Potter franchise and for the stories. That's my personal opinion. You may not agree with me, but I really feel that this controversy is not going away. And it's also something you don't want to have associated with such warm stories in its essence. I think who doesn't have a certain nostalgia? These were feel-good stories that we used to read when we were a lot younger than we are today. And now it's all kind of tainted with all the bitterness and all the fighting on the internet. And, I want this wizarding world to be a fantasy world. That's why I read fantasy. I want to step out of this world and out of the controversy. I want to be in this magical world. And when fantasy becomes too much entangled with these real life problems, then it doesn't work as an escape anymore. Speaking of escapism, I wrote an article the other day about Tolkien and how he actually sees escapism as a positive thing. It was a wonderful discovery. Actually, I was rereading his book on fairy tales, where he explains what the purposes of these stories that he tells about fairies. And a lot of people kind of thought that was not serious writing. You can't take these children's stories seriously. And he explains, well, actually, it is very important that we tell these fantasy stories. And one of the reasons is they help us to visualize a world that is better than the world that we live in. And we need to have those dreams. If you are a prisoner, you need to keep dreaming about the world outside. That will keep you going. If the walls of the prison in which you live is all you can think of and all you can talk about, you're going to have a miserable life. What keeps people going is hope. And that's what stories provide us with. I thought it was an incredible vision of the importance of storytelling. So if you missed that article that I wrote, just check out my Patreon site. It's part of last week's stories. And with that, I think it's time to wrap things up here, at least when it comes to the public part of the show. I will talk a little bit more about Vinland Saga, which is an anime series that I'm watching this month. So every month now, I'm going to watch a different series. This is also to counteract my ADHD habits, where I go from episode to episode and I watch everything at once. I want to focus on one story at a time. So I'm going to finish the Vinland Saga, created a number of TikTok videos about it. And I love it because in Vinland Saga, there's a lot of history, real history, and even church history that is integrated in the story. So I'll explain a little bit what I've discovered in the premium part of the show. I'll also talk a bit more about technology, about the Apple Vision Pro, as I said, and I bought some new technology for my kitchen, and I'm scared of it. I'm really scared of it. All that and more coming from my premium members. But all of you, I want to thank you so much that every week you tune in, you listen to this show. Hopefully it brings you joy, it makes you enthusiastic about stuff, and maybe also inspire you from time to time. I don't know. Do with it what you want, but I'm happy that you're there. And I'd love it if you could join my Patreon community. So take a look. Take care. See you next time. May the Force be with you. All right, that's first part of the show. Let's do part 2.
Japanimation. Cool.
It is time to talk about anime, and this month I am watching Vinland Saga. I've had a tremendously hard time entering this world of anime because it's such a vast new universe for me. I didn't grow up with anime. For years I've been ignoring anime because I just thought it was not for me. It just like stories about robots and it's just not my thing. How wrong was I, and how much do I appreciate that whole world right now? I think it's also thanks to Studio Ghibli with their amazing movies that for the first time I started to realize, well, wait a minute, anime is not the kind of like the stereotypical thing that I associate with anime. It's just animation. These are just animated movies. And just as we have so many different animated movies in the Western world. We've got Pixar, we've got Disney, we've got DreamWorks, lots of independent animation studios that are making amazing stories. The same is true for the Japanese and now also Chinese and Korean animation industry. All these stories are so different from one another. There's so many genres and subgenres, and it's this big world is extremely impenetrable if you're not familiar with that world, because if you go to the channels where they have a lot of anime, what are you going to pick? And it's thanks to my TikTok audience that I am starting to get a hold of, the important stories. The first one, of course, was Neon Genesis Evangelion. That was actually a pretty steep entry level for an anime beginner, but I was intrigued. It was fascinating. And I'm currently watching Vinland Saga, which appeals to me on a totally different level. What I love about this is that it shows a certain period in time which is very important for England, for Wales, for Scotland, for Denmark, and ultimately also for the rest of Europe, because this was the time of the Viking invasions, of a mingling on a huge scale of various cultures. And it's thanks to these invasions, which at the time were, of course, extremely negative for the victims of those invasions, but in the long run were extremely important to form Europe as we know it today. This whole Viking period was very unknown to me. When I was studying history in school, we focused on mostly our national history, on Second World War, on the development of Russia, and then it got a little bit vague. So we barely got any lessons about American history, for instance. So Civil War, all that, I had to catch up on that because I was never taught about that in secondary school, nor was it part of my curriculum when I studied philosophy and theology. And so I've got these blind spots when it comes to history. And when you're interested in history, like my friend Father Henry, he loves history. He reads so much. He like one of his hobbies is to sit down at the end of the day and just read his Wikipedia pages about history, and he remembers everything. I am like the total opposite. When I want to relax, I'm not going to browse Wikipedia websites. I want to play a video game or watch science fiction or whatever. And so I always feel a bit intimidated when I'm on vacation and Father Henry is teaching us everything about the history of the place where we are. But I also felt like, that's for history buffs. Why would I be interested in that? Well, Vinland Saga has really helped me to get a feel for that period, and it is because of good storytelling. For me, one of the reasons that history teaching failed me was that my teachers were just not very interesting. There were a few exceptions. I still remember that we had a teacher when I was studying in Louvain, in Belgium, and we were invited. This was in the first 2 years of my formation as a priest. So I was a seminarian. And the first 2 years, we were highly motivated to pick courses from other disciplines. So not just focus on philosophy, but to also follow history courses. Or even I did a couple of economy courses. Even I never wanted to become an economist, but it was just part of their philosophy was, if you want to become a philosopher, you need to have an extremely broad area of interest. You need to make sure that you have a foundation, not just in your small, narrow, focused, discipline. We need thinkers in this world that know about all these other things, and if only it is an introduction into history or economics or sociology or psychology, you're gonna be able to build upon that foundation later on yourself. And that's exactly what happened. I had this one teacher who was an amazing teacher, and his course was about the Middle Ages. And I remember the first lecture that he gave. We were in this big hall. I think there must have been at least 600 seats. This was one of the most popular courses at the university back then. And he was going to teach us about the Middle Ages. I had no idea what the Middle Ages for me was the Dark Ages. I played as a kid with like medieval Lego, the soldiers and building castles. And that was all I knew about the Middle Ages. It's just castles and dragons and, well, not dragons for real, but, that. And then he said, the biggest misconception about the Middle Ages is that it is one single culture, one single time frame. And the worst thing that you can say about the Middle Ages is that those are the Dark Ages. He said there's nothing dark about the Middle Ages. And then every course he would display, back then we used these projectors, and he would project photos of artifacts, of archaeological sites, maps, paintings, miniatures in books. Like the entire time, each course was 2 hours long. There was one break of 15 minutes. So for 2 hours, we were on the edge of our seats. And he was the only professor that I had in those days who would illustrate every single part of his lessons. And so through his teaching, the Middle Ages came alive. And when I think of the Middle Ages, I still picture all those images that he showed us. And it was such a vibrant, colorful period in time. And it's like we're talking about almost 1,000 years. How can you call that the Dark Ages? It is like half of our modern history. But the only downside is we never made it to England. It was very much focused on mainland Europe. And so the whole part about the Vikings and what was happening, so we were focusing on Thomas Aquinas and the monasteries in Europe, and we heard almost nothing. Again, it's just lack of time, I guess, about what was happening on the other side of the pond from my perspective here in Europe. And that was what was happening in England, in Wales, Scotland, the invasion of the Danes, etc. So Viking history, just again, totally blank on that. Vinland Saga is really teaching me how important that period has been, and also how fascinating that was and how much was going on. So I've explained before, it's the story of this boy who is from Finland. His father is actually a very noble man. He is killed by a bad guy called Askeladd, who actually has Welsh roots himself, so he's not fully Finnish or Danish. Anyway, his father is killed by this bad guy, Askeladd, and the boy joins Askeladd and his crew because he wants to avenge his father. He wants to kill Askeladd in a duel, but the only way in which he can do that is by becoming a warrior himself. So his upbringing is extremely violent. There are lots of traumas that he carries around. Ultimately, he makes it to England, and he follows Askeladd, while Askeladd is being pursued by this gigantic warrior who's also Danish, but who works both for the Danes and for the English. And his name is Thorkel the Tall, and he is portrayed as this kind of larger-than-life Arnold Schwarzenegger type of guy who is totally resistant to pain. He is fully in control. It's an incredible nemesis. And he is pursuing Askeladd and also the boy. But what I didn't know is this Thorkel warrior actually has existed. And the way he is portrayed in the series is based on what we know of this guy, who was indeed almost considered to be a giant and an incredible warrior. There's also, and this makes it interesting for me as a priest, there's also a very, very strong religious element in the storytelling. And this joins another part of the Danish history. Now, of course, Vikings, you don't associate that with Christianity. The Vikings had their own religions. They actually, a lot of them looked down upon Christianity. They felt it was for weaklings. And what the story does, it introduces us to a boy who is about the same age as Thorfinn, so the main character of the series. But he's a prince, and he's from Denmark, and he's the son of Father King Sween, who also has really existed. And his name is Canute. And he looks like a girl. He's got long hair. He's very timid. He always speaks a bit like Michael Jackson, and you see him praying in front of a crucifix. And then you see the soldiers, the other Vikings, they're like, look at the girl there. And he's praying to a god who is like a crucified dude? What a loser. And so it's like this insane story where this Prince Canute is used as as part of this plan that they have to overthrow King Sween, and to Askeladd wants to have power over England. So they go to Wales. There's a river there that they cross, and they join the local king there. And every once in a while during the anime, you have these history lessons where they just explain. It's just really a course in history, and I'm there almost taking notes, like, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know that. And so, but this prince is going to be very important in the rest of the story because he is growing into a great leader. So he starts as the almost stereotypical weak Catholic boy, but his moral character is insane, and the impact of Christianity on the boy who is dealing with all this trauma and is so violent out of reaction, it's all this grief about his murdered father, all that has to still be processed. But this boy is also going to change over the course of the story and is ultimately maybe even going to convert. I'm not there yet, but I have this inkling that this is just the first part of his story arc. It's an amazing series. I am so incredibly excited that I've gotten to know it. And I'm also really happy that this is a story that I can talk about on TikTok and make a natural connection between my presence on TikTok as a priest and at the same time a fan of anime series like this.
Why are you wearing glasses?
Reading.
Reading? I didn't know you could read.
Yes, it is time to talk about books. And last week I told you that I was reading 2 books per week. One as part of a series. So I'm following the same strategy that I follow with anime. I'm going to focus on one particular franchise. In this case, the Red Rising books. And then I read one book on the side, basically as a snack. And this week I'm actually focusing on a few books that I came across in my in my work on setting up my coaching services. So for me, coaching, of course, is a relatively new endeavor. I have taught, and I do know how to talk and teach. But coaching is akin to that, but it's also different. What is totally new to me is how to set up the kind of the business side of it and to create websites and to get clients and all that. So I'm putting a lot of time into studying books that have been recommended to me by others. And so I've been reading on email marketing. In the technical section, I'll talk a little bit about the work that we're doing on a new website and on mailing lists, etc. But I also know from experience that I need to work on my inner beliefs. Like, how do I picture myself? How do I look at myself? I know that I do a few things very well. I know, for instance, that I can talk for 1 hour and I don't have to prepare much because I've been doing that for 20 years now as a podcaster. So I can talk, but I'm very insecure when it comes to this coaching thing. Is that actually something I can do? I have no experience with that. Can I even find clients? How much do you charge? Is that, isn't that wrong to ask money for my services if I'm a priest? Am I not supposed to work for free? And then I have to combat that inner voice that constantly tells me you're not worth it. You give up, you're never going to make it. And I have to counterbalance that with reasoning and using my mind as an adult to say, well, wait a minute. There is a reason that I want to coach people. First of all, I want to help people do what I've been doing for 20 years. I know that my methods work and that you can actually create community. The proof is in the pudding. You are here. You're listening to this. You're part of what I built up over these 20 years. And so I know that that can help other people, my experience. That's number one. Number two is I want to be able to continue to work on TikTok, on YouTube, reaching out, finding new audiences, and being a media missionary there where most people in the church are unable or unwilling to go. I want to be able to do that, but that's something that is only that there is no monetary return on investment. This, especially if you look at TikTok, some of these videos reach 2 million young people. Every day I get notified when people watch and like and share videos. And sometimes the videos that I created a year ago, they're still being watched, they're still being commented upon. And all these commenters, like 90% of them, are teenagers, are young people that the church is unable to reach. But it's also an audience that doesn't have money. They're still in school. They don't have an income. So I don't expect them to be able to help me finance this mission. But it's my primary mission. So I keep telling myself the coaching is also going to enable me to continue this work on TikTok, this outreach to younger people, because it can create a secondary income stream. So is it wrong for a priest to ask to be remunerated for this? No, it's not, because this is what makes it possible for me to do what I do for you, for my podcast listeners on YouTube, on TikTok. And if I would only focus on TikTok, YouTube production, the fun would be over 2 years from now, because that's when we will reach the bottom of our reserves. We've calculated this. If I don't find extra sources of revenues or new patrons or donors or whatever, then 2 years from now, it's over and I have to stop. I have to go back to my bishop and ask him for a full-time job in parish ministry. That's the only way, because I need a house. I need to pay for food. So, of course, it's not going to come to that. But my whole struggle in this, especially now that I'm building this up, is constantly talking to myself and telling me it's going to be all right. You have this. You know how to do this. It's okay for you to develop this. And there's so much doubt, so much of this, like these remnants of imposter syndrome and all the insecurities, and they come back in full force whenever you want to try something new. So I'm reading some books to help me find solid ground from people that have done this before me and that know the way and can guide me. I'm so happy that I have Cliff Ravenscraft as a very experienced coach who's helping me with his feedback to stay on course and to not give up, and to especially to fight those inner beliefs that are holding me back. But I'm also reading this week. I'm reading 2 books actually. I'm cheating a bit. I was only going to read one, but I'm reading 2. One is written by Matt Furey, who's one of these guys that are tremendously good at email marketing. And so I found this book. It's kind of an older book where he talks about his career change. He used to be, what did he do? I think he was wasn't he a sports guy? Something like that. Anyway, he switched to marketing, and then he talks about ways in which he is doing his business. The book is weird. This is not a genre that I'm familiar with, and I also, like everything in me, is resisting, because it's talking a lot about the whole manifesting, and you have to visualize your successes. It's almost already there, and the book itself is called 100 Ways to Magnetize Money, and it's like, I am just so not into this kind of vocabulary, and it sounds like the kind of the magical thinking that I don't like about what was this whole Celestine Promise and whatnot, and all these kind of like new agey books. But I'm also reading this from a more like a critical point of view, where I'm thinking, well, in fact, what he's trying to say in his vocabulary is basically it's all about these inner beliefs. And this is something that I can actually understand from the perspective of psychology, because I know that our brains are very much dependent on how they get information and how we talk to ourselves. This inner speak, and I know this from my own experience, is extremely important and determines your chances of success. And the more you talk to yourself in a kind of degrading way, and like, this is never going to work, or I'm just going to aim for the middle ground because I will never be able to realize my dreams. Now, books like these challenge that kind of thinking. It was like, just imagine, just like make it up in a certain way. Like, even if it sounds like magic, but it's a thought exercise that you imagine a world in which there are no limits to what you can achieve. And that sounds, I know it sounds very American, it sounds very magical thinking, but as a thought experiment, what is holding me back? It's often the lack of confidence. It's this like giving up, like, oh, I won't be able to do this. And I convince myself that I don't even want to do it. Well, how else am I going to continue in my media ministry? So anyway, interesting book, challenging also because of its language, but ultimately good thought experiment. That's how I look at it. The second book that I'm reading, and the first time I read this, I was like, no, this is not for me. No, nah. And now I'm reading it 1 year later, and I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. Oh yeah, I think I understand what they mean. It's called the Prosperous Coach Method. It's written by Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin. This is a book that was recommended to me by Cliff Ravenscraft, and as I mentioned, I read this a year ago. Cliff always said, you got to do coaching. And I was like, no, that's not for me. I'm too shy for that. I can't do that. I don't even want to do this. And so I read that book, or I probably didn't even read it seriously. I don't remember much of it, but it was very off-putting. It was like, I'm not interested in this world. And now that I'm rereading it from a totally different perspective, now I'm an aspiring coach, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these guys know what they're talking about. And it's a lot about how can you, it's all about mindset. It's seeing coaching as a relationship. And marketing is not just selling stuff. No, it's creating a relationship. And then, like, I'm reading it with a totally different mindset myself, and now it starts to sink in. So it's incredible. I was listening to a podcast the other day by Cliff, and one of the things he said during that podcast was, when the apprentice is ready for it, the teaching will appear. And so you cannot understand something if you're not ready for it. And when he said that, I was like, yes, that is so 100% true, because I totally misunderstood what this book is about. And it's only now that I'm starting to understand which way I have to go. And if you had told me that I would be doing what I'm currently doing, in a minute I will talk more in detail what that is, I would have said, you're crazy. That's not my thing. That's not what I do. And I'm thinking, yeah, actually, and I enjoy it. It is really empowering to develop this because I'm doing something new. I'm challenging myself. And I know from my experience as a runner, I only was able to run a marathon because I challenged myself that one day I would run a marathon. Had I never set that impossible goal, I wouldn't have never tried. And I've run a ton of marathons. And I will run many more in the future. And I am fitter than ever before. Had I never set that goal, I would have never gotten there. That is what these books are good for. They challenge me to step away from my self-limiting beliefs. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you. I know it's a little bit long. Let's talk about food. That's Star Trek. No, let's talk about what I learned on the internet. Wrong set of jingles.
I need help.
You need a teacher. I can't teach you. maybe the internet has the information I need.
You know what I learned from the internet?
I understand that you learned a few new things.
There really is so much to learn.
So much to learn. Every time I don't know something, I ask the internet. And I have to be honest, I actually ask ChatGPT a lot. There is this new app that you can download from Microsoft, and it's called Copilot. I think I mentioned it before here on the show. And what Copilot enables you to do is to use ChatGPT in its latest incarnation. Normally, if you sign up for ChatGPT, in order to use the latest version, you have to pay a monthly fee. But Microsoft takes care of the money. And as long as you use their app, which of course is going to be good for their branding and their business, you can actually access the latest version of ChatGPT that is able to use the internet. And that's something that previous incarnations of ChatGPT couldn't do. They had a data set that went back to a couple of years ago. So if I would ask, give me a summary of the latest episode of Ahsoka, it would return with an answer like, unfortunately, I don't know about that series because my data set is too limited. The Copilot enables you to ask anything, even about recent things, and it just goes out on the internet and gathers information and processes it for you. For me, this has been so incredibly helpful. I'm still, as many people are, also very concerned about some of the ways people could misuse this kind of technology and could abuse it for political purposes that are, threatening to our world. There are so many ways in which you can use this tool for evil purposes, but it doesn't mean that the tool itself is evil. People said that about the internet. When 20 years ago, I was venturing onto the internet and created my first Star Wars website, so much criticism from my bishop, from the people that worked at the diocese. Oh, it's a fad. 2 years from now, nobody will be talking about the internet anymore. And I was like, seriously? And, it's going to be bad. I remember that I was challenging my bishop back then. I said, wouldn't it be awesome if you could do a live chat on the internet? And we can get into all the newspapers because no bishop has done this before. So I set up a chat with my bishop. It went live. I was there to moderate it, and it was a good. People were asking questions. This was a totally new way of communicating for my bishop at the time. And afterwards, I asked him, "What do you think of it?" And he said it was like kissing with a window in between you and your lover. And I was like, okay. First of all, I'm glad that we're not live because this is kind of a metaphor that's probably not appropriate for a celibate bishop, but okay, I see what you mean. But he was very negative. He said, this is going to estrange people from one another. This is not working. This is nothing like a real conversation or no, he wasn't on board. Whereas I thought it went extremely well. It was very vibrant, and it showed the church engaged in this modern technology. He didn't want to hear. I don't think he ever understood what the appeal was of social media. So a lot of people, you see a lot of that criticism now also when it comes to artificial intelligence. But I want my church to be not just always like warning people of the dangers. And I was reading this Vatican document that came out last year, and it starts with like the pitfalls of artificial intelligence, the pitfalls of using the internet. And I'm thinking, no, don't do it like that. Yes, talk about the problems, but don't start with it. It's a tool. It's our behavior that determines whether it is used for good or not. It's if you are a light side Jedi, you will use the Force for good. If you are a Sith Lord, you will use exactly the same Force to wreak havoc. It's the same thing. It's a metaphor for any tool that we have at our disposal. It's our choices that determine. Anyway, the power of AI is incredible. And so I use it also to learn about stuff that I don't know. So the other day I was at the supermarket and I saw this. My blender has broken down. I had a Philips blender, super powerful, could blend almost anything. But as is often the case with the brand Philips, it looked amazing. The engine was extremely powerful, but there's always this flaw. and that is the base was made out of plastic. And so the whole mechanism that turns around the blades of the blender, because it was made out of plastic, it's now broken. It doesn't blend anymore. So I was looking for a replacement of this, and I found a deal at my local supermarket, and they were selling and it sounds like something straight out of Back to the Future, the Nutribullet Ultra 1200. Ice. Where we bring this blender, we don't need any ice. It's like this magical device. It looks very futuristic, but I didn't know anything about a bullet blender, so I just asked ChatGPT. I was like, okay, I saw it, and I just type it in as if I would ask anyone who is an expert. I said, I saw this blender, the Nutribullet 1200. It was on sale, like 50% off. And how does it compare to other blenders? Is it better than the Philips one that I had, which is a couple of years old, and blah, blah, blah. And it gives me this entire article, like, oh, these are things that, you know, there's some other brands you might want to consider. This is what people say who use similar blenders. This is downsides, these are the upsides. I watched a few videos after that, and then I was like, okay, I think this will work for me. This is what I'm going to get this deal. There's not going to be a better deal anytime soon. And so now I am the proud owner of the Nutribullet Ultra 1200. I'm still researching how I can mount this to my bike so I can feed it empty beer cans and banana peels so I can bike faster. If you have any ideas or experience with that, let me know. What else? Oh, yes, the more technical stuff. We're getting rid of Adobe Cloud. We've been customers for several years. As a nonprofit organization, we're eligible for a reduced rate, but it still costs us about $400 a year, which is cheap because I think for the real deal you pay $800, and we have access to all the features. But increasingly, it became redundant. We use DaVinci Resolve for all our editing, and on my phone, I'm using CapCut, which is free and is an incredible editing program. Photoshop, barely ever use it anymore because we've got Canva, also free, just as, you know, at least for my use, it's good enough. I'm not a photo editor or anything. Then we have Audition. That is the program that I've used for 20 years, even before it was called Audition and bought by Adobe. It was using that to edit my podcasts. But I barely use it because I'm recording this podcast live and I'm using the Rodecaster, which adds compression and all sorts of filters, and it sounds as is. I just post this MP3 the way I record it. It goes straight to the internet, no editing needed. And so the same thing for the walk. I record that on a good quality recorder, and the only thing I need to do is to trim the ends and make the division between the premium part and the regular public part, but I can do that in a free editor like Audacity. So that saves us $400, which those savings go towards the Kajabi website that we're currently developing. So I've been working on that for an entire day today. This is hard. Oh, I've seen some examples. I mean, it's an amazing system, but I realized how much I have to come up with to present myself as a coach. So this is the coaching website. And so I'm hopefully going to be able to integrate my podcasts there as well. Ultimately, I want everything in Kajabi, but we're going to do it in phases. The first phase is to set up this website that I can point people to for, you know, if they're interested in my coaching services. But then I had to make a presentation of myself. Oh my goodness, the imposter syndrome just hit me so hard. I was looking at other people's website, and I was like, there's no way in the world I can promise that. I have no experience as a coach, and I don't have any digital products, etc., etc. It's like, what am I going to do? And I just powered through. I was like, come on, this is just a feeling. You're not going to feel like this every day. So I picked a template, I filled it in, and I came up actually with a couple of ideas. A lot of them were like super out there. I'm going to have 4 courses that I'm going to sell. I don't have 4 courses, but I was imagining, what if I were to create a course? What could it be about? And then the ideas started to flow. How do I present myself to an audience? You know, what is my image in a certain way? What's my persona here as a coach? I wanted to show people I'm a priest, but I'm also someone who is very good at connecting with a younger audience, because I know that that's where a lot of the pain is of my future clients. They're unable to connect with an audience that they would love to have, and they think that they can't do it. And I'm there to remove those barriers. So ultimately came up with a photo that I took opening the door of a TARDIS, like a mock-up of a TARDIS. And I was like, your story is bigger than you think, and it deserves to be heard. And I was trying to use that imagery. And I don't know if I'm going to keep this and if it's, going to be good. But at least it got me going. The creative juices started to flow. And at the end of the day, I had a website, a mock-up website, where I was like, okay, I am totally over-promising here. And if I would launch this today, I would systematically underdeliver. But this is the ideal. This is the dream. And now I'm going to work super hard to make sure that everything I dreamed up creating this website will become a reality. And in a certain way, having a physical page that shows me what it is going to be is helping me to make that a reality. So anyway, nothing to show you yet, but the process is amazing. And Kajabi is pretty amazing as well. All right, a final thing I want to briefly mention here is the Apple Vision Pro. It is now officially announced for February. It's not going to be available where I live, only in the United States. It's going to be the same price as they advertised, $3,500. And that's just the bare necessities. You're probably going to buy a whole slew of extras and whatnot. But it is looking interesting. They have added a number of things that I did not expect. The biggest surprise for me, and I'm excited about this, is that from the launch date, Apple will have more than 100 3D movies and TV shows available through Apple TV Plus. And in addition to that, they will also have a couple of 3D games that are available thanks to their gaming service, whatever it's called. So they actually use the infrastructure that they've been building up for 5 years now to deliver tailor-made 3D content to the owners of the Apple Vision Pro. This is something I totally missed. This is part of their strategy. This is why they are so confident that people will buy this thing, because they also own the channels, the content channels. And they already have filmed, without telling anyone, a number of their TV shows in 3D. Nobody knew. It's going to be there. And this is going to be potentially a revival of 3D movies, because imagining watching a 3D movie in on those high definition 3D screens that Apple is going to be able to provide thanks to their very high level technology, the movie in the television industry is going to jump on that, because they're going to be able to resell their movies in 3D, of course, for a high price. They can ask for premium prices because it's Apple and the customers are rich. So this is so smart, because this is how Apple is going to make people interested in developing for the Apple Vision Pro. And they know that the iPhone became a success because of the apps. And I think the Apple Vision Pro can become a success if the content providers are willing to dip into the water, to dip their toes in the water and to start making money. And where there's money, there's going to be development. And that will start that iteration loop that Apple does so well for all their products. I'm very excited about this. I'm super sad that it will probably take 4 or 5 years before this thing becomes even within my reach. They are not expected to do yearly iterations of this thing, so it's going to take a long time. But I will be here. I will wait patiently until I have my own personal private holodeck. That's what I'm aiming for. And that wraps it up for today's episode of The Break. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for being a patron. I really appreciate your support. Let me know if you're interested in my coaching services. Some of you have already reached out tentatively inquiring what it would entail. So just send me a note and I'll tell you more. And I also wanted to mention that from now on, I will be live, I hope, every Wednesday. I'm going to work hard. Might not always be possible, but the usual time to join the community live on the air while I'm recording the show and for a chat afterwards is every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, and that's 6 o'clock Central European Time. It's probably going to be midnight in Sydney. So if you're one of my listeners down under, you may be able to make it onto the live stream, depending on where you live in Australia, of course. And then, of course, for my Kiwis, unfortunately, we'll have to find another way to meet each other live. But that's what I wanted to know. Just mark it in your calendars every Wednesday at 6 Central European Time, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Join me for the live stream. It's going to be fun, I promise. God bless.